It's really nice to see you. First of all, let me
Yeah.
introduce I'm Reza and I'm a software engineer. We have been trying for a long time to produce English video podcasts with people from all around the world. And
Okay.
today we have a great guest from USA. And this is the first time which I have a conversation with a web developer.
Oh,
It's really nice. Okay, what's
yeah.
your name?
So my name is So the way you pronounce my name is Kwabena, but to make it shorter for people to say it easier, you can call me Kwabi, and that's my name.
Oh, interesting. Where are you originally from?
So my parents are originally from Ghana. I was born in America, and also if you want to call me 10K, which is like the end of my Instagram name, you can also call me 10K.
Oh, great. And where are you living? Which
So
state?
currently, currently I'm living in New Jersey, which is like right outside from New York.
Oh, New Jersey. I think there are a lot of software companies there. Is that right?
So I'm not sure about New Jersey, but New York, there's definitely a lot of software companies there. So that I actually work in New York.
Oh, great, great. What company do you work for?
So I'm working for a small consulting firm. It's called ITLIZE Global, and they have like a lot of clients on the East Coast. So one of the clients that I'm working with is currently in New York.
Okay, very interesting. To be honest, we had a lot of conversation about beautiful landscapes, favorite foods, drinks, customs, tradition, and this kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
today, I'm gonna talk about your career, software engineering.
Okay.
I think it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me about your career, your profession, your journey in your career.
Okay. Um, so in 2018, I graduated from college. Before I graduated from college, I had a job in New York City. It wasn't a job; it was more of an internship. It was a cybersecurity job, and I was working as an application security analyst for a company called CBS. It's a broadcasting company here in America. And when I was there, so basically what we were just doing, you were just making sure that we were like all of CBS websites didn't have any security threats on them. I did that for I think it was like 2015 in June to 2016 in July. I think that's how long I was doing it. So it was about a year. So after I graduated from college, um, I won't lie to you. This is probably what took the longest time, which was whenever any profession that you're doing, finding the first job is always difficult, right? So when I was trying to get
Yes.
the first job, I went through so many applications. It probably took about 10 months, but I eventually landed my first job, which is where I'm working right now. Um, and so I've been working with my current company for about a year and 6 months, and it's been okay so far. You know, I don't know how you guys do your whole software engineer process wherever you work, but where we work, we do something called agile development, right? So that's one thing that was interesting to learn. Agile development, basically, you have a bunch of tasks that the workplace is going to work on, and you basically pick from those tasks at the beginning of every sprint. So sprints is just the time period you have to work on something. So if they give you one task and your sprint is 2 weeks, you have 2 weeks to finish that task. So learning stuff like agile, you're only going to learn it if you're actually working in a work environment. Oh, and I skipped one thing. So my current job started, I think, January 2019, and then before that, I was working for one of my friends. He was trying to, like, he had a little startup, and that startup actually supplies medical school learning resources. So he basically wanted to build a site where somebody could come to the site and pick up some learning resources and study. So when I was building out that application, I was the only one working on it, and it took like say it took like 3 to 6 months,
Yes.
right? And I used MongoDB, Express, Angular, and Node, which are all pretty.
Oh,
Yeah, but
JavaScript frameworks. It's very interesting.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yes.
What was the first programming language which you have learned?
First programming language that I learned, it was Java. Java, right? Yeah, it was Java.
Oh,
So that was
Java. You have
around,
started with Java.
yeah. So I think that was around 2011, 2012, when I was still in high school. I was taking a class,
Oh,
and
yes.
that's the first
And
language they taught us.
if you have started with Java, why didn't you choose the backend section in
Oh,
development?
okay. So when I was building that first website, I from my understanding, what even up to this day, what I felt is JavaScript is easier and a little bit more lightweight when you're learning it. So that's why I decided to pick JavaScript, and also because Java and JavaScript are very also are both popular, but I just decided to pick JavaScript to build the backend.
Yes, to be honest, I'm a C++ developer. In fact, I'm a desktop developer. I just working with C++ and Qt framework. I don't know,
Okay.
you know about it or not. Yes, C++ is a really difficult language.
Yeah.
It has a lot of compilers, but I'm really interested to learn Java and JavaScript frameworks. Last year, I've decided to learn about React
Yeah.
and also Python for backend
Mm-hmm.
development. But my profession is just about C++ developer. Okay, great. Don't you think front-end development isn't sound very professional? Professional? A lot of developers, software developers think backend section is really
Uh, uh-huh.
proficient. It's really
Uh-huh.
professional. What's your idea about that?
So my thoughts. So we have front end, back end development. So for me, I work as a full stack developer, which is doing both of them. Um, I just enjoy having that full control of being able to work on front end and back end whenever I'm doing an application. But I would say that it's not professional. It's more so of front end development. I feel is a bit easier than back end development. I know that front end developers are probably going to get mad with me when I say that, but for me, in my in my experience, front end development is um, much easier than back end development. Because I mean, basically, all you're just a lot of the times you're dealing with markup languages like HTML and CSS, which are used to design the actual web page, and then JavaScript, like I said, is pretty easy to pick up. In terms of backend, you're going to be dealing with a lot of data. Um, you're going to be dealing with more logic, and I feel like on top of that, you also have to know backend.
Algorithms,
Yeah, algorithms. You have to know like more architectures. So
dev,
it's it's
DevOps, I think.
what?
DevOps.
Oh, yes, DevOps. DevOps is also a backend thing, but most of the time when you're working as a full stack developer, unless you're working at a very small startup, there would probably be somebody that works on DevOps, right? And you would probably just be working on the actual coding of the application. So in my opinion, front end development, back end development, they're both nice. If I really had to choose between the two of them, I would probably choose front end development. And that's because when you're doing front end development, you actually get to see what you're working on. Whereas back end development is mostly just data and you don't really get to see like something on the screen that is changing as you're coding. So that's my take on front end and back end
Absolutely.
development.
I totally agree with you because I think the customer just see the front end section,
Yeah.
and front end section is very important thing. Okay, great. You have said about agile development process. It means you are really in team working. Tell me about
Mm-hmm.
that because in my country, companies really have a lot of challenges with this because developers usually don't like team working, and they don't
Mm,
know a lot about these kind of agile methodologies like Scrum,
mm,
Kanban. I
mm,
don't know, or XP, this kind of stuff.
mm.
Tell me about that. Tell me about team working in your company, in your career.
Okay. So the first application I worked on, which is like my friend's startup, I wasn't really working in a team, so it was just basically me doing the code by myself. And you know that whenever you're coding, you have a repository, right, where you store your code.
Yes.
So there's different types of branches, and if you're working in a team, chances are you're going to make multiple branches where you're going to do your work. But since I was working by myself, I was just putting off the code in the master branch, right? So that wasn't really much of a teamwork experience. But now where I'm currently working, right? So if you're working on bigger
Sorry.
applications,
Isn't it locked, master branch?
is it locked? No, it's not. It's not locked. It's not locked.
Oh,
It's
it's not
it's
a
all
good practice, I think.
yeah. It's not a good practice. But since I was working by myself, that's just where
Oh,
I was
yes.
putting the code, right? It would have been different if I was working with somebody else. We probably would have had our own branches, and then when we are both done, we would basically merge our code and then put into the master branch. But because I was working alone, I was just working straight off the master branch. Uh, but where I'm currently working, when you're working on bigger applications, working by yourself is almost impossible since there's so much work to do. So of course, to make things work, there has to be some structure, right? So for us, our agile development process. So every 2 weeks, that's how long our sprints are, which is how long you have to do your work. So at the beginning of every sprint, we basically discuss the user stories, which are tasks that we're about to do. Everybody gets to choose which task they want to work on, and then they do an estimation of how long it's going to take them to do the work. And then throughout the sprint, at the beginning of each day, we basically meet up. We talk about things that we're working on, things that we are struggling with, and things that we're going to do for the day. And you just continuously do your work throughout the day. So throughout the sprint, and when you're done with something or you're starting something, you always have to update the status in I don't know if you know about Jira. So you would
Yes,
update
I
your
know.
stuff inside of yeah. So you would update your stuff
But
in Jira.
we are working with Microsoft DevOps.
Okay. Were you working with Microsoft DevOps like Azure? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So using Microsoft DevOps. So where I'm working, I mean, it's kind of strange, but they seem to do all the DevOps stuff manually without using Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud. It's Microsoft. It's all they do it all by themselves. So during the sprint, you would be updating your statuses in Jira. And then, of course, like I said, now since you're working with multiple people, you can't just put your code into the master branch. What ends up happening is that you have a bunch of branches that people are working on, and there would also be other branches that people would merge their code into. And when everything is working properly, then they would put it into the master branch. So that's the good way to do it. And
Yes.
is anything else?
Very interesting. To be honest, I think one of the most challenging thing in teamwork process is milestone estimation. I mean, release milestone estimation.
Hmm.
You guys have any milestone release for your software product?
Do you mean
I mean,
are you talking about meeting deadlines? Is that what you're talking about?
uh, I don't mean about a spring review. I mean about those 3 months milestone or 6 month 6 month milestone, release milestone.
Oh, you're talking about meeting release dates. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yes, I think so.
Okay. Yeah, so
I
meeting
think
meeting
I think
release
it's
dates.
very challenging to
It is.
estimate this.
Yeah,
Yes,
it is. Because so like the business people always want you to do things in a certain way. And
yes,
they'll say, okay, in the next 3 months we want you to finish this, right? And a lot of the times there's going to be friction between the business people and the developers because they think things go very quickly, but that's not the case, right? And when we work, if you make wrong estimations, the business people get so angry at you. But it's a very difficult process because in development, things can always happen that will make it go much slower than you actually estimated for. So I understand what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. I think product owner uh, and team always have a lot of struggle with each
Uh,
other.
that's,
Tell me about those kind of things in your team. Me, I'm working in a very great team.
yeah.
Every day we have a lot of challenges with product owner. They change their mind always. They change the stories, user stories. I mean, in middle of the sprint, it's not
Mm,
so cool. It's really bad. Tell me
yeah.
about those difficulties in your team.
So so our product owner is a very tough person at times to deal with. And it's the same. It's the same where she'll be making very rough estimates and being very strict with you if you don't produce finish in the time that she gave you. Um, typical example of something that was very harsh. So in our application we have something called roles and permissions where every single user is allowed to do a certain amount of things. So we
Yes.
had an old version. We had an old version, and the old version was working perfectly fine, excellent, right? But our product owner basically said that she wants new rules and permissions, right? And the the um the estimates that they want, I think they said that. So currently, she said from September. So we this so users have so before we started working on these new roles and permissions, it took another team to finish the roles and maybe about 2 years to finish, but she wants us to change to the new one within less than a year, right? Which
Yes.
that's a very hard estimate. So I and then on top of that, during the actual sprint, sometimes stories aren't properly prepared, so things will end up changing during the sprint, and that can throw you off finishing in time, right? So I just that's from my experience. Sometimes things are not perfect.
Oh, yes, yes. I know how you feel. Uh, let me ask you an interesting question. Suppose product owner in a planning day says we have to implement this feature till next spring,
Mhm.
and you guys, your team think it's impossible to deliver this feature. What would you do uh, as a scrum master in a team?
As a scrum master.
Do
Amen.
you do resist?
So sometimes the scrum master isn't 100% technical, right? So maybe they really
Yes.
don't know about all the coding it will take to make something work. How I was talking about the new roles and permissions. So even to this day, I still look at the task as something that is very hard and very difficult, and something that I don't believe we should be doing. But all you can do as a scrum master is you're gonna ask the technical people. So product owner has said this. Uh, what do you think we can do? And the developers or the technical lead will try and give you the estimates for how long it will take. And a lot of the times, you're going to tell the product owner this is how long it's going to take, and they won't be happy with you, and they'll be telling you that no, you should be finishing it. Maybe if you're saying 6 months, they'll be saying 3 months. And it's kind of interesting what we're talking about right now. I was thinking about doing an Instagram post on it because it happens. It happens a lot. There's always friction between the business and the developers, right? So if you're a
Yes.
scrum master, if you're a scrum master and you get put in that type of situation, you're gonna have to talk to the technical lead, the whole development team to see what they say. That's what I would say.
Yes, very interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Okay, now it's turn to test-driven development. What's
Oh, okay.
totally as a front-end development, what's your idea about test and test cases? Do you
Test,
like
test.
test cases or not?
It's actually kind of interesting. So for C sharp, so we have I'm using C sharp for backend development, and then also some front end development. So whenever like you make a new API, you have to write a unit test case for it to make sure it's passing,
Yes.
right? And it's the same for front end dev. So maybe you'll write a component and you have to test some changes that you made. Uh, Personally, I don't like unit test cases because it doesn't feel like it's part of the actual development. You don't. It just a test case, but it's necessary to keep code over a long period of time healthy. You know, so that's my
Uh,
take on test cases.
yes, I think I, I know backend developers really care about test cases, all kind of test case, like
Mm,
unit test, integration test, I don't know, performance test, or all those kind of test cases. And I think they're so important for backend section. But
mm.
I think in front end section, front end developers
Uh,
don't really care about test cases. I just want to confirm that. Is that right?
so it's kind of interesting. So why work? Same thing you just said. So for backend development, we're writing unit test cases, we're writing integration test cases. But when it comes to front end, for some reason, people don't seem to care as much. So I don't know.
Uh,
That's
oh,
that that that's from my experience.
is it means they don't care about bugs? Because if they don't write any test cases, maybe they will face with a bunch of bugs. Do you agree with me?
So whenever you write test cases, you're trying to test if a piece of code is working
Yes.
properly, is returning the right type of data. And if you end up not writing test cases, what is going to be what's going to govern whether your code is working correctly is if a QA tester tests your code and see if it works, right? So if the QA tester tests your code and see if it works, then it would be deemed as it is good to go, right? So if you don't, this is my opinion. Maybe it will change in the future. If you don't write test cases, it's not the end of the world. Um, but what would have to happen is you would have to have good QAs on your team to test the code,
Yes.
right? That's important, right? And I at some companies it's not only just the QA that will test your code. Sometimes they also have all the developers test your code to make sure that it's correct or it's working properly. So I would say code to be sustainable over a long period of time, you'd have to do good QA testing and then also write unit test cases, integration test cases. Even though I don't like doing it, I personally don't like doing it because it's boring. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and to be honest, testing front end section is really hard and it's very fragile, because in fact visual testing is really a challenging thing, and sometimes it's impossible to test a front end section. Do you usually implement acceptance tests for
Acceptance
front
test.
end,
For the most
or
part, no.
just test the front end with QA?
So I don't even know if I should be going into the processes that we do at my workplace, but so we have an Angular application. So it's kind of weird. So our application is ASP.NET front end, and then also we're mixing
Yes.
Angular with ASP.NET, which is kind of interesting. Um, so for Angular, we are writing test cases, but for ASP.NET, we're not, from what I understand. So accepts. You said, have I ever done acceptance test cases? And I don't think I have, unless we call it something different. I don't think I have.
Yes, I think there's a kind of popular tools in front end section for acceptance testing. It's called Selenium. Is that right? Selenium.
Selenium. Yeah, that's a front end testing framework, man. Yes,
Yes,
yes, yes.
it's a web automation
Oh,
tool,
oh,
I think.
oh, 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 oh. I know what you're talking about now. So acceptance test. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So after the QA test the application and everything is good to go, the next thing we do is we go into user acceptance testing, right? And actually, where I work, the business analysts also do some testing, right? So they do user acceptance testing, and before one of the QAs at my workplace left, he was also trying to do acceptance testing with Selenium, where Selenium would automatically test the application from the front end, but you'd have to write the code that would do automated tests. It's kind of cool, you know. So
Yes.
automatically the mouse will be moving on the screen, it will be clicking fields, it will be inputting data, and that's what he was using Selenium for. Yeah.
Oh, great, great, great. And as a front-end developer, what is your most favorite CSS framework?
CSS framework or
Yes.
JavaScript framework.
Uh, and JavaScript framework.
Yeah, JavaScript framework. So when I first got started with JavaScript frameworks, so Angular is what I learned first, and Angular actually uses TypeScript, right? So TypeScript
Yes.
is very similar to JavaScript, so you can call it a JavaScript framework. And I became very comfortable with using Angular. But same as you. I wanted to learn what React was about since it's so popular, right? So
Oh, yes.
I started working on this project in, React Native.
Oh, yes. It's
Yeah,
used for mobile
yeah,
applications.
for mobile applications. So I started learning React Native and starting to. It's very similar to React. It has a few different native components that you can use, but it's very similar. And I would say my favorite one, it would probably be Angular because I know it the best, right? And
Yes.
if you told me to build a new product currently, I would probably use Angular. But I'm still learning React by myself. So when I was learning Angular, I actually had somebody like teaching me, showing me what to do. So it was very easy to pick up. If I had any questions, I would ask. But for React, I'm doing it by myself. And one thing about learning something by yourself, it's pretty it can be pretty difficult at times because you're trying to get all of the knowledge by yourself. You have to look for the resources. But yeah, Angular is probably my favorite JavaScript framework. Yeah.
Oh, yes, Angular. It's very interesting. Uh, okay. That was very interesting. I know there are a lot of high technology software companies there in USA, like Google, Microsoft, and these kind of things. And I just heard there are a lot of Indian engineers, software engineer there.
Hmm.
Is that right?
That's
I heard the companies, the software companies, are full of Indian engineers.
so I don't work at any of those companies, but where I work, it's full of Indians. It's
Oh,
there's so many Indians that you would when I first got there, I felt like I was in a different country. Like I felt like I was in India because there's just so many. Um, as for Microsoft, Google, Facebook, I haven't worked there before. It would be nice to work there, but I'm not sure how the demographics are for which which type of people work there. But where I work, there's a lot of Indians. There's a lot, and in tech in
yes.
general, there's a lot of Indians.
Yes, and also you have mentioned it's very challenging to find a job in terms of in software engineering in USA. Tell me about job interviews. I mean software job interviews
Okay, actually, that's
in
that's a good
USA.
question because right now I'm actually preparing for I want to try and find a new job, so I'm doing the whole interview preparation process. So you can kind of split this into to two parts. So we have
Yes,
the much bigger companies, which are like FANG. So FANG stands for Facebook, Amazon, Apple, I think it's Netflix, and then Google. So if you're going to work at a company that is similar to a FANG company that is very, very big tech, what you're going to have to end up doing is doing some leak code problems. You know leak code, right?
no, no, I don't. What
Oh,
that
you don't
means?
you don't know you don't know leak code. Okay. So leak code is a site where you do data structure and algorithm questions, right? So
Oh
they have
yes,
about yeah, they have about 1,000, maybe 300 questions that you can do. And these FANG companies, they test you on data structure and algorithm questions. So maybe a company like Google. Google is notorious for having difficult interviews, right? And almost all the questions they test you on data structures and algorithm questions. So if you want to go and work at one of those companies, you should probably sign up for a site like LeetCode and be learning all the concepts, doing a lot of questions. So for me personally, right now I've done about 130 questions, right? And from what I
yes,
understand, some people before they go to these companies, they do like 400 questions, right? Just to be fully prepared. Um, and then besides just lead code questions, they also sometimes have system design questions. So maybe they'll ask you, hey, I want to build this web application for my users, and they'll say how do you go about building it? And when you have a question like that, you have to be asking them the requirements that you're going to need to build the actual system. Then you have to say, okay, this is what I'm going to use my database. These are the tables I'm going to use. This is the backend framework I'm going to use. Then after that, you'll say, okay, for the front end, this is what I'm going to use. So that's system design questions. So for the bigger tech companies, it's lead code, data structures, and algorithm questions, and then you're also gonna have to do system design, and then they also have the behavioral questions that they'll ask you. So a company like Amazon, they have something called leadership principles, and those are the behavioral
yes,
questions. So you'd have to know the leadership principles before you go there, and then you would have to be able to give them stories about your career and how they align with the leadership principles. Uh, Now, if we're talking, so like I said, this is two parts. So now, if we have smaller startups that are trying to test you for interviews, most of the time they're going to ask you on practical knowledge, not just data structures and algorithm questions. Because data structures and algorithms, I mean, it's nice to interview you on that, but they're not. It's not real world scenario stuff, right? So if you're going to smaller
yes,
startups, most of the times they're gonna ask you questions based off of a real world scenario. Like they'll say, um, oh, perfect example. So they'll say, oh, I have. This is one of the questions that I did recently. I have a card game, right? And the card game
yes.
works. Yeah, the card game works like this. How do you code this method in the card game, right? And then you would type the code for
Okay.
them, and and there would be like a whole. I think it's like an online IDE where you can type in your code, and then test it. So that's the interview process in America, from what I know. Smaller tech and then bigger tech. They both have their own ways of doing their stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you. Uh, you know, I as a C++ developer, I really prefer to just focus on one thing, just C++. But always, I really like to learn different things like machine learning, like, I don't know, Python, Java, JavaScript, web development, and this kind of things. But always, I would say by myself, you should just focus on one thing. Uh, it's not so good to distract just on the way. What's your idea about that? Do you prefer to just focus on one thing or learn different things? You're working USA, and I think it's very challenging for you to find a better job and this kind of thing. Is that right?
So it's kind of interesting. So it's not difficult to find a job, but if you have no experience whatsoever, it's the same for a lot of jobs. Finding your first one is
Yes.
always going to take a very long time. But after you get your first one, finding the next one isn't as difficult. Like for me, I'm trying to find my next one, and it's been much easier than the first time. In terms of learning multiple technologies, so I would say it's good to try and learn different things. So for instance, I was building a personal project the other time, and to make something in the personal project work, I had to use Python, right? So
Yes.
it's kind of interesting. After you learn your first language or your first framework, learning the next one becomes much easier, right? So I would say that it's good to be exposed to more languages and frameworks. For me personally, so at work I used a lot of C sharp, right? JavaScript, TypeScript, and then for personal products, I'll probably end up using JavaScript just because of how easy it is to use. And like I said, after you learn your first framework or language, learning the next one is much easier. So I'm all for it. If you want to learn multiple things, it's a good idea. It will make you smarter and allow you to see the differences between frameworks and languages. That's what I would
That's
say.
very interesting. Uh, I saw a lot of pictures from Facebook companies, Google companies, Microsoft, and this kind of stuff. They have a lot of I don't know, interesting thing like open coffee shop, like pantry, open restaurant, and specifically
Yeah.
Airbnb.
Uh,
Is it true? Sometimes I think it's just for show up.
so I think it's true, but right now, since coronavirus is going on, nobody's in the office, right? So
Yes.
they don't even get to enjoy those things. But I think it's true. I think it's true. I I
Oh
haven't
yes.
I haven't I, I haven't gone to any of these campuses, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. But I think it's real.
Oh yes. Tell me about your job environment. Is it there is any open coffee shop or restaurant there?
So where I work, so I work for a government agency, right? And government
Yes.
agencies aren't known to be doing all this fancy stuff. Or you have a coffee shop. We don't even have a coffee machine, man. So they're not known for doing like coffee machines, free lunch, ping pong tables, beds. But so my company personally does not have that, right? I'm sure companies like Google.
Oh yes, yes, great. Uh, you know, in the past, usually I was
Mm,
just coding at the weekends because I was
mm,
very interested to coding to learn new things. But after a while, I ended up with this. I thought it's not so cool. I should do another thing. Maybe I should do a sport to have exercise, to go to the trip, and this kind of because I ended up with this. It's really improves my performance and this kind of thing. What's your idea? What do you do usually at weekends? Do you
so
coding?
okay, that's a good question. So so I've been preparing for the job search process for a long time. So more recently, I've just been doing coding questions after work, and but before that, usually what I do after work, and then maybe a little bit on Saturday, is I'll be working on personal projects, right? So
Oh yes.
projects that I think will be useful to other people. So one product that I was working on, it was a time tracker. So it would basically tell you how long you're spending on applications on your computer, right? And I was using JavaScript to do that. There's a framework called Electron JS that will allow you to build desktop
Yes.
applications like what you do. So I was using an Electron.js to build a desktop application. Um, and then the other project that I was working on, I don't know if you're familiar with habit trackers. So habit trackers basically if
Sorry, habit tracker.
yeah habit tracker. So basically,
Oh yes.
you let's say you want to form a habit of running every day, right? So basically
Oh
in the
yes.
habit tracker, yeah, basically in the habit tracker, you track that I ran on Monday, I ran on Tuesday, I ran on Wednesday, and you'll keep on doing that, and then after a while, running will become a habit for you, right? So
Oh
that's what the
yes.
habit track. Yeah, that's what a habit tracker is used for. So for that, like I said, I was learning React Native. That's what I was using, and then I was using TypeScript to code tracker. So after work, it's mostly doing my personal projects, and then or maybe on Saturday a little bit more personal projects. Then on Sunday, I usually relax. Go and meet up with friends or something like that. Yeah.
Yes, very, very interesting. And you have mentioned very great point. And I've got a question.
Yeah.
Last year I've decided to run my company by myself. I had an
Okay.
idea, and in fact, I would want to implement a kind of Instagram robot through Python, but I
Mm,
failed. I failed in running company.
mm.
Uh, you're living in USA, and there are a lot of big companies there. Can you dream to run your company in the future in USA?
You know that would be awesome, but one thing that you have to understand is that there's very few people that will be able to bring an idea into the world and make it big, gigantic. Like the chances of me or you building the next Facebook or Google is not that high, right? There's only going to be a few
Yes.
people that are able to do something like that. But definitely, you can start a company that's maybe small sized or medium sized and is making a decent amount of money, right? That's being an entrepreneur, and I feel like you can be an entrepreneur, but will you be the best one? That's the question, right? So you can be an entrepreneur, but you might not be like we watch sports players on TV, right? Like Messi, Ronaldo. These are all very big sports players. So you can be a sports player, but
Yes.
you might not be the biggest sports player. So same thing is you can be an entrepreneur, but you might not be the biggest one. But you can definitely start something and make some money from it. That's my take.
Oh, yes, yes. Very good idea. Very good idea.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I'm sure American people are really liking sports.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
what's your most favorite sports?
Sports.
Is
Most
it
favorite sport.
soccer?
So yeah, it is soccer. Yeah, you guess correct. So when I mean before I went to Ghana, I did like soccer already. And when I went to Ghana, these guys really really like soccer, right? That's what they love. So they really follow, the English Premier League.
No, no, I
You
didn't.
Oh, you don't know the English Premier League. So the English Premier League, it's a popular soccer league in England, and people in Ghana really, really follow that league, right? So I started supporting
Yes.
a soccer team called Arsenal Football Club, and I've just been paying attention to soccer every day. So probably when I'm done with you, I'm probably gonna check what's going on in soccer because that's what I really like. But in America, soccer isn't as big as other places like in Europe, right? Uh, they like basketball, football. They also have baseball. They have hockey. Soccer isn't as big as it should be yet. So that's sports in America. Yeah.
Oh, yes, very interesting. Let me tell you something.
Okay.
You said you're working from home during pandemic.
Yeah.
And me too. We are in the second wave in our country.
Mhm.
I mean, in terms of pandemic, and
Mhm.
sometimes we have to work from home. But the product owner and the manager I mean, my manager says you're not going to work from home. Do you have the same problem?
Is that what they're telling you, man? Well, for us, I don't really think the product owner is in control of that, man. There's the the government agency is much bigger than the product owner. So if the government agency says that you guys have to come into work, then we'll go into work. But so far they haven't mentioned anything like that. So I think we're gonna be working at home for a while.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, great, great. And the last question, I don't want to hold you
Okay.
anymore.
Okay. Okay.
Tell me about average salary of junior developer and senior developers in your state.
Okay. So I think if you go on, so there's a site called Glassdoor, and they have like salaries of developers and other jobs. So for a junior developer, you could be making as low as 50 or 60,000, right? From my understanding.
Yes.
But if you're a senior developer, the ceiling is very high for the salaries. You can be making a lot of money. I have a friend that's working in California, and he's making a lot of
Oh,
money. So for his total compensation package, he had like $250,000, right?
oh,
That's
yes.
that's a lot of money, right? And he's not even a senior yet. So in America we have the East Coast, then we have like the middle, and then we have the West Coast. If you're working on the West Coast, your salary is going to be pretty high, and that's because like the cost of living is pretty high. So you need the money to pay. So you can be making a lot of money out there, man. You can be making more than $300,000 if
Oh,
if you
yes. Great.
yeah, if you're senior enough. But and even over there and on the West Coast, if you're a junior developer, you can be making like 100,000 and something, right? But
Yes.
o- over here on the East Coast, things are a little bit different. Salaries are a little bit lower, and for some of these big tech companies, if you want to go and look at more information on these salaries, there's a site called levels.fyi, right? So if you go over there, you can
Oh,
look at all
yes.
this. Yeah, you can look at all the salaries. Um, but here on the East Coast, the salaries are a little bit lower. If you're a senior developer, for us to make a guess, you'd be making like 200,000 something for maybe base base pay. Um, and then and if you're working at big tech companies, they give you stock options, right? So let's say the company is a publicly
Really?
traded company. Yeah. So let's say the the company is a publicly traded, then they'll end up giving you like maybe 30,000 in stock, 40,000 in stock. And then if you work at a smaller tech company, they'll try and give you equity into the company. Like they'll say you'll have I don't know the stuff for smaller tech companies because I don't look at into it as much, but they'll give you equity in the company when you're starting, right? So you basically have
Yes.
your base pay, you might have your signing bonus, and then you'll have the stocks that are getting the company. So that would form your total compensation package, right? So
Oh,
that's
yes.
that's
Great,
my take on
great,
on
great.
salaries. Yeah.
Oh, yes, great. Okay, I don't want to hold you anymore. Thanks so much.
Okay.
And that was a great session. I really enjoyed and I really learned a lot. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for accepting my request.
Yeah. Yeah, I respect what you're doing, man. I can see you hustling and trying to make things work. So continue the good work, man.
Thanks so much. It's really
Yeah,
nice of you to say that. Thanks so
yeah,
much.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Okay.
and have a nice day. Bye.
Yeah, you do. Bye.